Welcome back, Daffers. It's time for episode 3. So in this one, you'll be glad to hear that there's gonna be no configuration, because we covered a lot of that in the first 2 episodes. But what we need to start with is a couple of things and details I didn't mention in the first 2 episodes. So when we build something new with the brushes, for example, let me change the size on this one, like that, you know we need to portalize, right? But then there's also this one, optimize, and these two are almost the same. You can use them interchangeably, basically. The difference is, firstly, optimization takes longer, and there's more to that than that. When you portalize your level, the system basically computes all those cells and all those brushes and renders everything, and when you optimize your level, it does the same thing, except in the most optimal way. So it figures out how to perfectly split and join all the cells to, save on memory and everything. And while you're not going to be optimizing as often as portalizing, it's a good idea to optimize every once in a while, like every hour or so, or especially after building something long and difficult. And that's because optimizing often allows you to find errors, which usually crop up only during optimization, but not during portalization. So, yeah. That allows you to see what you did wrong, and you can return to it and fix it before it's too late. So that's why people optimize very often. Now, next to portalize and optimize, there are also others. So there's compute pathfinding database, we know that one, and we use that if we change something with the room brushes. So for example, we haven't room brushed this airbrush. Let me do that. Shift insert for me, and I still got that 0.25 thing going on. Doesn't matter. Go in game. And as you can hear, there is no sound, despite there being a room brush. So what's going on there, we just need to update or compute pathfinding database again. And now it should be fine, see? So that's that. And also when working with AIs and other stuff, it's good to also build the room database and build the AI database. In the mono window, you can see how it's all built. So there should be like building rooms, blah, 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 building AI rooms. And this is usually instantaneous. But if you don't do that, it warns you. New room database required AI rooms to be reset. So basically what it says is AIs will bump into walls and ceiling and everything if you don't compute that. So, and it does happen. Okay, that would be that toward these 6 options here. And there's also this one, relight level. Let's go to Ctrl-Shift-O. Sometimes when you change textures or brushes, especially textures, especially new textures, they will still be bright despite the entire rest of the level being dark. And that's because you need to relight it, or also with torches and stuff like that. So relighting level fixes that. So now our area here is pretty well built. Let's take a look at some other things. So sometimes it will happen to you, probably very often, it happens to me very often, that you do something and you're like, oops, didn't mean to do that. When I go back, you can also do this undo button, but what's much more convenient is just clicking or holding Ctrl and Z, and that takes it back, so no harm done. However, the big bummer on this is that once you portalize or optimize this, you can go back. So if I change the size like this and I portalize, no undo option there. So again, I gotta put it, oh crap, I gotta see, and this is what happens now. Whatever, it was 12. Yeah, so you can always save it with this if you remember the value which was there before, or if you can sort of figure out what kind of value you're looking for. So there. Also, sometimes it will happen to you that you will not be able to move the camera or do anything, and that's because of this. You accidentally clicked in this window, and since this cursor is here, you're not able to move. So all you need to do is erase that, hit enter, and that will get you out of that window. And while we're on that, there's another reason why you won't be able to move sometimes, and that's because you accidentally hit caps lock. Thus making all your WASD and stuff like that capitalized, which means the Dromed no longer responds to that. So be like, what's going on? I can click on the brushes, but I can't move. Yeah, just hit caps lock and everything is back to normal. So these are like the little things that sometimes take years to figure out. Well, not years, okay. Minutes. But Yeah, that was an exaggeration. But yeah, it's good to know them so that when something like that happens to you, you know instantly what might have gone wrong. One more thing that often happens is that you get your cameras out of sync. And that usually happens if you zoom in or zoom out only with one view, and then you move around. You see that now it's all messed up because these are moving, but this one isn't moving. So all you gotta do is zoom back out so you get on the same sort of, well, zoom, and then you need to sync them all, synchronize all. And now you're back where you were before. Also, sometimes you're gonna misclick and accidentally, instead of teleport camera, either hide the grid, which I seem to have done right now. So let's take a look. Yeah. So I accidentally hit the grid, but we already saw that when we were changing the font. But then you will accidentally also sometimes click this, solo view. Bam, what happened now? You're gonna be confused, like what is going on? Well, you basically made that one view the only view you want to see for the time being. But there is a very easy way to put it back, basically unsolo. Okay, you might accidentally do it with either one of these, or you might even do it intentionally because you want to see this view properly. So solo and unsolo basically puts that view as the only view and then removes it again. Now let me also talk briefly about these lighting and light maps. So there are different settings for these. When you go to quick lighting, that's obviously what you want if you're just building and you want quick portalization, because the others will take more time. And 16-bit light maps is the same deal. 16-bit is for quick portalization. Now, after certain sections of your missions are done, you'll always want to test the lighting and the light maps at their highest quality. So that will be object cast lighting, which means that now even objects cast shadows, and 32-bit light maps down here. So those are the most highest quality settings for your level. However, if I go Ctrl-Shift-O and in-game, that's what I didn't do, reportalize. So let me talk about this for a brief moment. If you change some brushes and then you forget to portalize, it's gonna ask you before you go in-game. That's really good, so you never forget to sort of portalize. So just click yes and it will do that for you. No need to worry about that. But as you can see, the light maps don't really matter here because what I've been building so far leaves a lot to be desired. There are no objects or anything. So that actually reminds me, let's start building properly. So how do we build properly? Well, that's a good question. What people usually recommend is that you start on a higher grid than this, like grid 14 for example, which only allows you to build with like 2, 4, 6, 8 and so on. And that's good to establish the basic structure, the basic plan of your level, if you do indeed build that way. I sometimes build in reverse, first the details and then the structure. Also, I forgot one tiny but one very important detail. If I make, for example, a brush here, let me just make a brush there. How do we delete stuff? Well, there is this button, del, which stands for delete. You can just hit that. Or alternatively, you can hit the key that you have on your keyboard, which says delete. Like that. That's what I prefer. Okay, let's move on. So let's just build here and create, for example, a corridor here. Now, corridors... I'm gonna have to actually move this one as well because it's not really aligned well. Whatever, let me just delete everything we have here because it's just not good enough. And let's start over. So let's build with like, I don't know, I'm just gonna build with 14, 14, and roof should be, or ceiling should be like 12. It's good enough. And we have the starting point here. After that, let's, for example, build a small doorway here. So I want the doorway, I'm gonna shrink it like this. And doorways are usually 4 and 8. Most commonly 4, 8. And it should logically be only like 1 deep, but you can make it 2, it's fine. The grid currently is not gonna let us make it 1 because it's set to 14. Just keep it that way for now. And now let's make another room here. For example, this one is kind of short. Let's make it back to 12 and align it again. So everything is aligned here, perfectly snapped to the 14 grid. Okay, that's good for a start. Let's just portalize this and take a look at it. So we have this one room And then you have this other room, and they are joined by this doorway, which is 2 feet thick. I think that's too much, but you know, it's really up to you. It depends what kind of texture you're using and how big your door frame is later on. Depends on lots of factors, and it's really up to each artist and, you know, Dromedator to make these decisions on their own. Okay, so now let's learn how we copy paste brushes, because let's say that we want 2 doorways. Okay, so let's just shift and drag this one over here, and I want another doorway of the same size over here. I could just do it manually like that because it's not really difficult, but later on there are going to be things which require the copy paste function much more than this, like for example stairs, or I don't know, various architectural stuff you might be thinking of creating. So let's just portalize this. It's not really necessary, but I just wanted to. So now with the brush selected, click on this button. It's named clone. Only once. Now you see nothing happened really, but it did. It cloned the brush, so there are currently 2 brushes in the same spot. Now if you hold shift and move this brush over here, you can see there's still this one. Okay, so basically when you clone, it creates the exact clone of what you have selected in the exact same spot. Now be careful when you clone things so you don't accidentally leave them behind and you don't have 2 brushes of the exact same dimensions in one spot, because you would probably never find out. So be really careful when you clone so it doesn't happen. It shouldn't really matter much. I mean, it doesn't really cause any kind of mayhem, but it's just generally sloppy. So now let's portalize this. And we have these 2 doorways. You know, for no reason at all, no artistic merit here, just sort of fooling around. Alright, so now that we know how to clone brushes and how to copy paste them basically, let's take a look at how to create a solid brush, because I introduced that at the beginning. I never actually told you how to do it. So let's go back to the editor. And here, with the brush selected, do you see this? This says fill air. Basically, it makes it an air brush. If I change this to fill solid, it makes it a solid brush. Again, I have to reportalize. So portalize, go in game. Now you can see this is actually a solid brush filling the doorway here. Or it's actually in a solid in the first place, because this is actually solid, right? You gotta carve into that. Anyway, now I can move this solid brush here, for example, so we can see it better, and portalize. And let's take a look. And goddamn, it's not here. Why? Well, here's why. Time. Let's take a look at what time actually is. Each brush you make is saved in this time index, or whatever we call it. The time is over here. So let's say, for example, take a look at this brush. This brush has time 2. This brush has time 0. Now our dear solid brush has time 1. And that means it was created before this brush. So the higher the number, the later it was created. First we created this first brush, therefore it is 0. Then we created this doorway, that's 1. Then we created this one, that's 2. And then we cloned the doorway. This means this one is 3. And then there is a 4, I don't know what that is, doesn't matter. Perhaps there isn't a 4. So what happens is basically if you put a brush, a solid brush you created, into an airbrush which you created after that, then it's like you make a solid and then you carve into it with air. Basically the airbrush overrides the solid brush, and that's why we see no solid brush here, because the airbrush was created afterwards. Now to make this easy to work with, we can of course change the time. So let's say I want to say that this airbrush shouldn't override the solid brush. Therefore I want to make the solid brush after I made the airbrush. So the airbrush is 2, solid brush is 1. All I need to do is change the solid brush to like 2 and click portalize. And now basically the solid brush is 2, the airbrush is 1, and it appears, because from the Dromed point of view it was created after the airbrush, and so it is preferred. First you create the airbrush and then you create a solid inside it. Hopefully this way of explaining it was understandable. But to demonstrate further, let's take a look at how we usually use solids and time and stuff like that. Let me change the grid to 12. Oh, it's already on 12. I don't know how that happened. But anyway, so we have this grid on 12. Let's say I want to extend this like that. So basically the airbrush is extending outside the doorway. Now I clone the airbrush. I make it somewhat larger and taller, only slightly, like that. And I change it to solid. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I want to create a doorway. Do you see it from this view? In this view it's clearly visible. So you have this solid, and in there you have this air. Air basically carved into the solid, so you get this nice door frame. There are some negatives to building the door frame in this way, but I'll explain those later. First, if we go in game, we see that the solid brush overrides the airbrush. So we need to change the time here. Airbrush is 2, solid brush is 3. So basically we need to make the airbrush 3 or something. Now as you get to higher numbers, like hundreds and thousands, it's not easy to sort of figure out what kind of number should I put in there so I get this kind of effect. And for the most part, you're not gonna have to think about that because you can just click to end. And that basically puts it as the last brush, which overrides everything else. Click that, portalize, and there you go. So it is really only with complicated structures of, you know, various solid and airbrushes intertwining in various ways that you really have to think about time and which one goes and which one comes first and which one comes last. But for a simple doorway like this, basically putting the airbrush to end solves the problem. So now we have this doorway. Let me give you the negatives of building the doorway like this. First of all, the positives. The positives are you only use 2 brushes. Basically the solid brush, and inside there is the airbrush. And you create this beautiful door frame on both sides, right? Both in this room and in this room, because it's deep enough so it protrudes into both rooms. Now the negatives. If you try to texture this thing with wood, let's say you want this to be sort of a wooden frame. Let's find some wooden texture. For example, this one, as low res as it might be, and texture this whole thing. Okay, whatever. So you can see that the way the planks are aligned, it might not be the way it should really appear. Perhaps it's fine like this if you want those planks to go that direction. If you want them to go in a different direction and you try to change it here, the rotation, for example, you want to go make it 90, so the planks go like that, then you realize, okay, but I also changed the rotation of these planks, right? It's really hard to see on this low resolution texture, but if I introduce a high resolution texture, it will be clearer. Basically, it requires another solid brush to make the alignment proper if you want to align the planks that way. Of course, you could just put a different kind of texture there, which doesn't really require the alignment of planks, and then your problem would be solved. So I'll talk about this later when we introduce custom textures, because it's going to be clearly visible there. This is kind of hard to see and hard to explain. So let's move on. Now that we have this set up, it's a good idea to room brush it, why not, right? So again, Shift plus insert, and now make sure you select the airbrush inside it, go Shift plus insert, and here Shift plus insert. And optimize and compute this, and this, and this, because why not? We don't have any AIs, it doesn't really matter now, but you know. Now let me just briefly go back to room brushes, because we have just used them here to room brush this level. So let me go to filter and unfilter the terrain so I can select the room brushes here. When working with room brushes, there are a bunch of things you gotta adhere to. Firstly, you can't really put 2 room brushes inside of each other. If you do that and try to compute the database, pathfinding database, let me just unclick that. Watch what happens. Room brush center inside another room brush. Blah 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 blah, warning. Dromed doesn't like that, doesn't like that at all, and you shouldn't really do what Dromed doesn't like, because Dromed will gladly take the revenge. So let's just move that room brush back. And putting room brushes inside of each other isn't really necessary here, it's just an example of what you cannot do with the room brush. Okay, now we can go in game. Also put this back to quick lighting and 16-bit maps. It doesn't really matter now because our level is currently tiny, but when you're basically building and testing, it's good to keep these here because it makes everything faster, you know, portalization, optimization, everything. So now we can go in game with this, and we can move around, we can hear our footsteps and everything. We can even toggle the light bright. And for some reason, I have left these two George textures here, and they are really ugly. Let me just replace them real quick with whatever. This was the thing we were using? No, we're not. There and there. Better. Okay, so now we have our rooms. What do we do now? Let's try different shapes. So if we go here into shapes, you can see we have a cylinder, pyramid, corner, apex, pyramid, wedge, and this thing I can't really pronounce. Do something. Hold on.
Dodecahedron.
Dodecahedron. Okay, thank you, random lady from the dictionary. So this shape is called dodecahedron. We're gonna use it later. I think the most used shape after cube is a wedge. So let's select a wedge here. And now if I, left click and drag, I'm creating a wedge. So why we use a wedge when we have a perfectly rotatable cube? Because basically rotating a cube like this, by the way, I'm doing this with Alt, holding Alt and rotating, but it's not really necessary with the cube. This is really bad. I mean, you shouldn't really try to build something like a sloping area with rotated cube brushes. That's just really messy. So it's much better to use a wedge and then to combine it with some kind of cube brush, like for example so. So here I don't really see how well it's aligned, but it's probably well aligned. Crap, let me just zoom out here. Yeah, so this looks pretty good, sort of. And I can perhaps even make this longer. Let's make it like 28. Put it here. And these basically all snap to grid, so this is why the grid is very useful. Currently the grid is on 14, so that should be pretty much good. Now if we portalize, go in game, you can see what we have created here. Basically a sloping roof like that goes down here. Now this could be good for a staircase, like a really short staircase here. And let's take a look at how we built a staircase. Now there are many ways to build a staircase. Let's just see how I built the staircase, and then you can decide if you like it or not. And of course you're gonna like it. So go to cube, because staircase is made of cubes. Well, almost. And it doesn't really matter which brush we select. Basically we want them to be as wide as this brush, right? So selecting this brush is a good idea, because then we specify the other coordinates. So we create this as a stair. Now I need to shrink the grid size down to like 12 for me to be able to create good stairs. So each stair should be something like 1. And it should start where basically the floor starts, right? So this is the first stair. Now the first thing you want to do when you create the first stair is set all that crap on it. So first fill it with solid, portalize. So now we have a solid stair. Now what you want to do is you want to texture your stair and decide on the texture before you start making more stairs, because then you would have to retexture each stair separately, and that would be a pain, obviously. So let's just decide on the texture. For example, I want the stairs to look like this. It's kind of unusual, but why not? And I could also change the scale here a little bit, for example on 15, and that looks very interesting. Now one thing, don't you just wish that you were able to look from the air at how the texture looks and where you are? Guess what? In Dromed you can fly. So press Shift and Q. Bam, we are in fly mode. We can fly around a level. So I can basically just fly out here and look at this from all angles. And this actually looks pretty good, surprisingly. I wouldn't believe this would look good, but this is pretty interesting. So it's really well aligned with the stair. Yeah, so you can basically fly around your level like this. And if you want to unfly yourself and move like a normal human being again, you can just press P. Except I have P set to something else, so it doesn't work for me. So if it doesn't work for you either, you can just do it manually. You need to bring up the console by Control and P. That brings up this, command box, except in game mode, but it's still the same command box. And here, what you can type is unfly. How simple. Press it and you've just gotten rid of the fly mode, right? So you're back to normalness. Now when you fly around, again, Shift Q, there's also another thing you can use, and it's not necessary for now, but for later when there are objects, you can press Alt P, and that toggles physics, so you can move through objects. And you can't really move through walls just as well, because, well, you could, but it's kinda... Dromed isn't too entirely happy about that, and here there is not really anywhere to move through a wall, because if I move here, I'm just gonna get stuck eternally in this corner like a really unhappy Dromedator. And get rid of that, Garrett. See, and now we're here. So we can just sort of fly into here. Whoa. And again, Alt P toggles the physics back, so now I can't walk through the wall or fly through it. And again, Control P, and unfly, I'm back to being a human. Anyway, back to the stairs. If I go back to edit mode, I'm pretty satisfied with this texture. I don't know about you. You can change it, and now we're gonna clone the stair. So use the view, which allows you to see the stair from the side, like this one. Sometimes it's gonna be the front, sometimes the right, because it depends on which direction you're moving the stairs. So here is the front. Let's just move here, zoom in a little bit. I can use the hotkeys here, right? And while I have the stair selected, I'm gonna clone it. And again, shift and drag it. And the next stair is going to be positioned here. So here's the trick. The height of each stair should be 0.75. Since these stairs have 1 and 1 dimensions, like 1 foot, 1 foot, moving it over here is ideal. They overlap slightly. Now again, clone and move it. If you zoom out, you're gonna be able to move a bit more freely. Again, clone and do this, but you need to make sure that you are doing it right. So it's basically always 0.75 and that you are covering only the 1/4 of the previous stair. Again, clone, put it here, clone, put it here. Slightly repetitive, but kinda okay still. And now here's the problem. So more often than not, you're gonna get into a situation where it doesn't really end up as you would have imagined, and then it's really up to you what you do. You can just leave the last stair being just half a foot. It doesn't really matter. And this isn't that much sloppy, this is pretty clean. So you portalize, and you can take a look at your stairs. They look pretty okay. Yeah, pretty much. I think it's pretty much fine. And there are a bunch of things we need to do now. First of all, if you are satisfied with the stairs and you want them like this, now we gotta fill this. There's space underneath the stairs, you see this? This space here is bad for several reasons. The first one is obviously that it computes all these cells and all these polygons and everything, because this world here actually gets created, but we're not using it. So that's the first bad thing. The second bad thing is that the AIs get just crazy over that. They can sort of think that they can enter the place when they really can't, and then they'll just keep questioning themselves over and over. It's a mess. So there's just one simple thing we need to do here, and that's fill it up with a wedge. And you already know what a wedge looks like, right? It's this shape over here. So we could possibly just clone this, move it down here, and then adjust the dimensions and try to make it fit under the staircase. However, there is a much easier way and a far more reliable way to do this. So let's go back to shapes, make sure we are on cube, and create a cube roughly around the staircase. Then zoom in to make sure that the top left corner of the cube is perfectly aligned with the top left stair, and the bottom right corner is perfectly aligned like this with the right bottom stair. Now what this gives us, we already know how wide the staircase is. It's 14 feet. However, we didn't know the height and the length of the staircase, which now we know is 11 and 8.5. These are going to be crucial dimensions and crucial numbers, because if we now go to shape and wedge, we can just create a wedge and basically enter the numbers here. So 14, 11, 8.5. And now it's just a simple matter of putting the wedge in place correctly. Yeah, and with the grid that's pretty easy. Now, why all the fuss? Because this is the only way we can place the wedge under the stairs and make sure that as the top face of the wedge goes through the staircase, it always goes through where the stairs are connected, and thus it doesn't create any empty space on the inside underneath the staircase, and doesn't create any extra faces or any extra polygons and stuff on the outside. So it's basically very, very clean. And you could have as many stairs as you want, you could have 100 stairs, but if you always place the wedge like this, from the corner to the corner, it will always work. So now let's make sure it's fill solid, and let's portalize, and take a look. So we don't see much from this point of view, so let me just go into fly mode, toggle the physics, and go through like a ghost. And as you can see here, I messed up. And yeah, that's normal, because I mess up quite often. You see how I messed up? I forgot to align it here. So there was a little empty space. Let me portalize again. Go into game mode. Forgot to fly. So I toggled the physics, but I forgot to go into fly mode, so I automatically fell through. Anyway, now you can see I cleaned up my mess pretty successfully, I hope. So there is no longer any space underneath. It's always good to check it, because this is like a simple mistake you'll probably notice at some point, right? If you forget to align it here and it goes like that, you're bound to notice it. But yeah, just make sure that, oh crap, just make sure that everything is clean and nothing unnecessarily gets portalized and optimized and computed and stuff like that. Perfect, so this is our staircase. And as I said, you can have as many stairs as you want. You could even have deeper stairs, for example with 1.5 foot or even with 2 feet. And this would still work if you placed the wedge like this from the top corner to the bottom corner of the top stair to the bottom stair. It will always work. Let's actually take a look at making another staircase while we're here. But before we do that, let's room brush this, because we forgot to do that. So shift insert for me, and shift insert for me here as well. However, this might be a slight problem. So as I may have mentioned before, I don't remember, all room brushes always need to have the center inside an airbrush. So it can't be inside a solid, because otherwise Dromed starts screaming at you. Now, that happens a lot. So what we need to do with this is possibly, I think I'll just move it slightly lower, so that this point, this is the center of the room brush, is actually inside air, so it aligns here pretty well, it aligns here as well. They can overlap, that's fine, but the centers can't overlap, so you can't overlap the room brush all the way into the center of another room brush, but doing it like this is perfectly fine. Let's see if this actually is something that Dromed likes, or if he's gonna start screaming at me. Let's open the mono window. He seems to be pretty content. Let's go in game. Oh boy. Now when this happens to you, you gotta be quick, because you either gotta go in game and quickly go into fly mode so you don't fall through, or quickly toggle the physics. I did the latter. Okay, and now I'm not stuck in the floor, I hope. So now we can see that our staircase in our area here is perfectly, you know, done, portalized, optimized, computed. It works pretty well. And the staircase is clean. How about we make another staircase here, like a doorway here and a staircase down? That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Let's go try that. So now these room brushes are just messing me up, but I'll keep them this way. So let's just build a doorway here first. Oops, I forgot to go into shapes and go to cube. So never mind. So let's make a doorway. We know doorways are usually 248. Well, they are like 148. This still seems a bit too thick, but I don't know. It's really up to you. They don't really have to be 4-8 either. They can be like 3.5 and 7, or large or anything. Depends what kind of people you have in your mission. So this is the doorway, and now there should be something behind it, obviously. Oh, I just thought I heard an AI. That is scary. Sometimes this happens to you, that when you build your level and you know you have no AIs in there, and you accidentally have placed an AI somewhere, or the Dromed just going crazy, and an AI appears like a haunt or something, it just freaks you the heck out. That is terrible. I gotta check now. 1 second. Nope, nobody's here. Okay. Alright, so let's just build this. Alright, so let's select the doorway. I forgot to push my grid back to 14. Since I'm not building stairs now, it will be better for building this corridor. Also, is the doorway... Yeah, it's not, see? The doorway's kind of messed up here. Because, do you see the position? 34, 250, that's really unnecessary. So let's just move it here, so it's clean. And actually, this brush is also kind of messed up here. Or is it not? Oh, that's the room brush. Jeez. See how the room brushes messed me up? I thought it was the grid. I was like, what is going on there? Okay, so this doorway is clean. And let's adjust the size of this. So I think it should be, for example, like 20 deep. Let's make it really deep. Align the top with this brush and make it really deep and possibly quite longer. 20 perhaps? Sounds good. And I want to make it even longer because I want to make deeper stairs. That'll be interesting. And that's good enough. Let's portalize. And Garrett hurt himself a little bit perhaps. Oh, I can make this jump. Garrett is awesome. Okay, let's take a look at this from the side. So now we'll be using this view because we are building in a different direction. Zoom in a little bit. And now we need to go back to grid 12. And build the first stair. Normally this would be 1, 1. The height is still going to be the same. The height should remain the same for one main reason, and that reason is AIs. If you make stairs which are a bit taller than 0.75, Garrett might be able to, or Garrett will be able to climb it, obviously, but the AIs might get stuck on it, and that's just going to be really annoying. So just keep the height to 0.75. However, the depth, we can adjust that. Let's make it 1.5 this time. That's a pretty good depth. And the stair is just as wide as the corridor we're creating it inside in, because I had the corridor selected before I made the stair, right? So it inherits both the position on the, in the world and the width. So that's perfect. Now let's start cloning, and before actually that, let's just make it solid. I almost forgot. And let's take a look at what this stair is like. Let's texture it first. So this stair could be made of wood. We could just use this texture. What is this texture? Wood plank 2G. I think it's this one. And you can see what's going on here. We might want to rotate it here. So enter 90 here in the rotation to make the rotation sort of, sensical. And I think this stair is quite alright. So let's start the cloning process. We're still on grid 12. And let's clone. This is like playing in Paint all over again, isn't it? It's not that bad, actually. I mean, consider how many staircases do you usually make in a mission. And look at that, it actually aligns perfectly with the floor. However, this stair is now 1. Now I think making a stair with 1 foot height is still possible for the AIs, but sometimes it might get tricky and stucky and ugly. I almost feel like doing something about it here. Although putting a stair here would be beyond weird, right? Let's just take a look at what it looks like. It's really odd. I don't know. Let's just remove that bottom stair and hope that 1 foot height is still fine for the AI. We can test it later actually. That'll be a good test. So we have the staircase, and now again, let's just make the large cube brush. Make sure that the top edge aligns perfectly with the top stair, and the bottom edge and the bottom corner with the bottom stair. Take the dimensions, so we know the dimensions are 19 and a half, 10 and 10. Pretty good dimensions. So shape, wedge, create a wedge, and 19.5, 10 and 10. And damn, what is wrong? Well, let's take a look at what is wrong. The wedge is actually aligned, or actually rotated like that for that staircase. So we gotta rotate it a bit. Let's rotate it like this. And now we gotta probably do that, or more like this. And this is a bit experimental. Give me a minute, because I can never figure out there. I can never seem to figure out which way I need to rotate it to make it like that, because I just can't think in this, you know, geometrical way. Anyway, now you can see that we need to change these dimensions. This one needs to be 10. Now it's aligned. And I think this one needs to be 19.5. No, the other one. This one. So this one needs to be 19.5. Since now the wedge is rotated in a different way, the height becomes the depth and vice versa and so on, okay? So you gotta sort of figure out where you actually are. And this is how we put the wedge in. So as you can see, corner to corner, oh, I hate the grid. And if we go up, you can see the wedge, the top face of the wedge, the main face of the wedge, goes cleanly through where the stairs are connected, all the way to the top, thus not creating any extra space or crap or stuff that would basically cause Dromed some pain. Let's go in game. And might as well check if it's all aligned. I think it is. Always check in all the views. So you see here it's aligned perfectly, here it's aligned perfectly, and here as well. So it should be pretty much clean. Of course, why we hear nothing is because there's no room brush in this room. So let's make a room brush. And this one should be pretty simple. We just select this big airbrush, hit Shift Insert, and of course for the doorway as well. And optimize and compute this, go in game again, and enjoy the sound of Garrett's footsteps. One thing I'm not sure about is where the heck this staircase leads, but I think we'll find out in the next episode. That will be episode 4. So thanks for watching and see you there.